let's review a few statistics and geography about Sudan. First, the population is about 27 million, slightly less than that of California. The racial groups are 52% black, 39% Arab, 6% Beja. I pronounce that correctly? B-E-J-A. The religious groups are 70% Sunni Muslim, 18% animist, 5% Christian. The GDP is $8.5 billion for 1990. The per capita income less than $100 per year. And the literacy rate is 27%. So you can see that this is really the end of the earth. Gene in New York. Gene?
Yes, sir. In the United States, the press only seems to emphasize white-on-white ethnic cleansing as opposed to black-on-black or Asian-on-Asian ethnic cleansing. Wouldn't it help us have a better understanding if they explored it more?
Susan, do you have thoughts on that?
What's happening really in Sudan is this. It's not even Arab against Christian, animist. The war in Sudan has to do with business. There's the Nile Valley elite, the merchant class in Sudan, that wants to exploit the oil and the agricultural land in Sudan. And so therefore they're moving the Nubians off the land in that area, and where there's also oil, they don't care about the violence in the short term. They see the wealth of the country in the long term, and that's basically what the nature of the civil war is in Sudan. The other things are just fringe.
Let's talk about the United States in relation to this horror scene in Africa, where 1.5 million people have died already, right?
And about 300,000, at least between 300,000 and 500,000 people are at risk right now of dying.
And you have an ongoing degenerating situation. You know the action that we took in Somalia, where if we're trying to quantify pain, suffering, and death, the Somalian situation, for all of its horror, does not match quantitatively, if that's the way we can possibly conceive of this, the horror of Sudan, correct? You go along with that?
No, but there are some definite differences there. I disagree with Suzanne to a degree. I think that the war in Sudan is a religious war between North and South. I think it's Islam versus animist and Christian, and I think the Khartoum government is trying to Arabize and Islamicize.
It's not an Islamic government, though. This is a phony government. This is a complete distortion of Islam. This is a military junta.
But it's a fundamentalist.
Fundamentalist and military, but it is not Islamic.
You've got several
They're trying to export Islamic fundamentalism throughout all of North Africa.
You've got several considerations before you. You have this humanitarian situation of immense, incalculable proportions that should weigh heavily upon the conscience not only of the United States but the international community, correct? You've also got the Sudan connection to the proposed bombing, to the planned bombing, horrific as that was, in Manhattan, right?
Yeah,
so that's a security concern.
Yes, and it's a security concern with Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, all of the other Islamic states, with the exception of Iran, are scared to death of this country because they continue to export terrorism.
They're scared to death of Iran.
They're scared to death of Sudan, which is an agent of Iran.
Sudan being providing the training camps for the terrorists.
That's right.
Okay. Well, what the public relations impact of Sudan's association with the Sheikh and with the terrorism kind of permits the United States to perform a Pontius Pilate routine and wash its hands of this situation because they're outlaws from the international community. Is that not the de facto PR effect of this?
There's an interesting point here, and that is that during Bill Casey's time, Khartoum was the most important CIA post in Africa. And Hassan Turabi helped the CIA...
Who is now the evil genius behind the power.
Yes. Hassan Turabi helped the CIA deal with Gaddafi. So therefore, there is maybe some kind of, there has been some kind of, we haven't been coming down as hard on Hassan Turabi.
What are you saying? You think we're pulling our punches?
Last year, the Bush administration invited Hassan Turabi to Washington. And then he spoke with the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. And so there may be some kind of
You share Susan's views about...
I share her views up to 12 months ago. But I think since that time, I think the State Department, the President administration has no use for Sudan. They realize that it is a very, very dangerous government and that something has got to be done there.
But we still haven't taken a position.
What's the fact? Well, we're going to take one next week.
What are you going to do next week?
We're going to file a resolution asking the State Department to put them on the terrorist list, to have an arms embargo against us, to set up, neutral zones and things like that. Plus the fact, though, that you still got the humanitarian factor that we can't ignore, that 500,000 people are going to die there within the next 4 months if we do not get some aid in there.
Well, you're not talking about interceding. You're talking about interceding multilaterally, but they've rejected the United Nations, have they not?
They've rejected, yes. They don't want a UN humanitarian envoy.
That's why we need to put them on the terrorist list.
And they've rejected the idea of safe havens. It's hopeless.
You don't want us to intercede, do you, or intervene unilaterally?
No, I don't. The other thing too, from your map, you can't get from here to there. Sudan is just inaccessible.
Well, you can't get to Khartoum?
You can get to Khartoum, but you can't get south where the people are starving. I had to come up through Uganda to get there.
It's thoroughly mined, and then there are enormous swamps the size of Belgium in the upper Nile area.
What condition is Khartoum in?
Well, Khartoum is an armed camp right now, and the fact is that it is...
You mean it looks like Beirut?
Well, no, nothing's been bombed out and everything, but you do not have... There is no ACLU in Khartoum.
Well, the sleazy thing about Khartoum is that the refugees camps, the displaced camps, begin at the rim of Khartoum and go back about 2 million people. These people have been brought up from the south and are being used as cheap labor. There are no trade unions, and it's a total exploitation of human beings.
The Clinton head of the National Security Council is a man by the name of Anthony Lake. He was a Kissinger protege. And then they split when Kissinger was head of the National Security Agency himself. Tony Lake says that Africa is a high priority for the United States. Do you feel a special sense of empowerment? Do you think he means what he says?
I do. I do. That one first speech that he made dealt with this subject, and I firmly believe him. I have talked to him about additional aid to Africa. You got 600 million people there, and it has incredible potential, but we can't ignore it.
Things are very dangerous right now.
I got a quick question for you. We've only got about 10 seconds. Do you lament the underpublicity, the underpublication of this dreaded situation there?
Yes, I think it's outrageous that the press hasn't picked up on it.
Susan, thank you. Rushing, thank you, Congressman. We appreciate you being here. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for Tom Snyder. He's coming up next.
Next, join Tom Snyder.